There are multiple ways to keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast. Through our Instagram handle, the Wolf Connection Pod. And for comments and questions, send us an email to podcast@wolfconnection.org with your comments, questions, and guest ideas for Stephen and myself. You may hear your question answered on an upcoming podcast. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Calfa. Let's talk about some morals. This is a very important guest that we have with us because of all of the rulings that have come down due to the change in the Montana wolf hunting season that happened last week. We were thrilled. We actually booked her prior to this, but the timing works out so well. So she is the Carnivore Coexistence Advocate for WildEarth Guardians since April of this year. She's Lizzy Pennock. Lizzy, it's great to have you here. Thanks for making the time and wonderful timing on your part.
Yeah, I know. It worked out really well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. It's really great to have you here, and we're going to get into just the lawsuits, what yourselves and Project Coyote were working in tandem to do, and then really the fallout of all this, because this was really a huge win for wolves, at least in Montana for the time being. And we'll get into all that. But really give everybody just a basic background, because you have a bachelor's in marine science. You were an environmental law fellow getting into WildEarth Guardians at first, and now you're the Carnivore Coexistence Advocate. How did that all come about? Was your passion always in law? Were you always into the environment, wolves in general? How did you get started?
For me, it was always the environment. And that started at the end of high school. I read a book by Michael Pollan about industrial agriculture. And I learned about the impacts of that on both like the animals and the environment. And it just blew my mind. Like I just went through my life, like eating meat all the time and not thinking about like the environment or the impacts of the things that I did. And I read that book, and it just completely transformed the way I saw the world. And so and it was first my passion for marine science, because soon after that, my senior year of high school, I did like a senior thesis project, like everybody did, on the blacktip reef shark and like shark conservation in general. And I learned about industrial fishing, which is like mind blowing. You know, they put these like long lines out in the ocean that just catch everything for miles, and it's really destructive. So that is what took me to Hawaii, where I got my marine science degree. And it was always science for me. I had a really influential teacher in high school. Junior year, I was like, maybe if I applied myself, I wouldn't be so stressed out on a basic quiz. So I started actually trying, and I had like seventh period off, and I would go in for tutoring. And this man taught me chemistry, and I was like, wow, this is really cool to like apply myself and do well and actually understand what's going on. So really passionate about science, really passionate about like wildlife, and just, you know, we have these species that are just disappearing, and it makes my blood boil, like that this is happening. And there's just no other career path for me where I don't spend all of my professional time like doing something about it and saying something about it, and my non-professional time as well, like, let's be honest. But like the more my undergrad went on, you know, I did really well. I loved the science. I realized I was never going to be objective, and I saw what I saw then was a gap between science and policymaking. Looking back, I see that gap is a lot smaller than I thought it was. And there are a lot of like advocate scientists, which is amazing. But I just thought, you know, I don't know that science is like the way that I want to do this. And then I didn't know what to do, because I always thought I'd go get a PhD and be a scientist. And so I took some time off. I traveled the world and, worked as a bartender and at a vegetarian cafe in Denver. And I thought, maybe I'll go to law school, which if you ask my parents if they saw that coming, they would have probably said yes. I didn't see that coming. So I applied for law school. I knew I wanted to do environmental law, so I only applied in a couple of places. Lewis and Clark is the best place for that. And that's where I went. And second year, I started working with WildEarth Guardians, just kind of on and off, because I went to a happy hour and I was the only student there. And I threw myself at them and said, please let me work for you. And I just haven't left. So that was kind of how I got to my fellowship, and I chose Guardians for that. And then the timing of my current job coming open, because I've always worked in the wildlife program and that's what I wanted to do. So when this job came open, I threw myself at that as well. And I was really thankful to be chosen for this job.
Yeah, it seems to have worked out so well for you. What was it about WildEarth Guardians that drew you to their cause or their mission?
I think the people, the mission is great. And what I love the work that they do. And there's a lot of organizations doing that work. But the people that I met and how many of them went out of their way to help me learn and give me opportunities to do new things, and feedback and constructive criticism is so essential when you're going through law school. And I just felt like a kindred connection. And so I was just really drawn to the team and the people themselves.
Actually, for those who don't know, can you just fill everyone in on what WildEarth Guardians' mission is and what they've been working on, including some of what your website names as landmark victories?
Yeah, so I can go into that. So Guardians has been around in a couple different forms, but for more than 30 years. And we have 4 programs. So we focus on rivers, mostly the Colorado River Basin, climate and energy, wild places, which is a lot of we look at logging a lot of national forest issues and things related to that. And then wildlife. And we're all in the West. So we're kind of scattered around with a couple of main offices. But we just, we do a lot of things that other groups don't do, I think, which also is something I'm drawn to is we take risky cases. We take cases where people are like, don't do that. And we're like, we're going to do it. And it usually works out. And this is one of those cases, which is really exciting. And you don't always win, but somebody has to try. And sometimes it works out. And I appreciate that the organization is willing to take those risks and believe in their people and support them, whether we win or whether we have to try again in another way. So yeah, West-wide environmental protection really on all fronts.
What's the basis for when you go, and we'll get into the suits that we're going to be talking about today, but what's the basis for Guardians in there? We're going to go and fight this fight specifically. Well, because you do cover such a wide swath of environmental issues. So what is it that really says, okay, we're going to pinpoint this thing specifically, whether it's in the rivers or climate and energy or whatever it is, and then you go forward and create litigation for that?
It's a lot of it's bottom up driven. So our staff, we have a lot of autonomy to when we see things or potential issues, that we keep track of, and we say, hey, this one's ringing alarm bells. And I think probably all programs are different based on their program directors, management style and leadership style. But I can speak for the wildlife program. So it just kind of depends if it fits in the umbrella of one of our focus areas. So for me, it's wolves and grizzlies in the Northern Rockies. So that's 5 jobs. I can't do all of that as one person. So things that are really egregious, like what's happening to bring this case about in Montana and Idaho, it's kind of all hands on deck for that. So that's at the top of our priority list. And then a lot of it comes down to timing, like with our endangered species list work. My coworker is our endangered species attorney. If one species is more imperiled or has some sort of federal decision coming down sooner than later, it can be kind of determined by things that are out of our hands. So we kind of pay attention to a lot of things. And then sometimes we have to act really quickly because of, the timing of what the Fish and Wildlife Service does, or the timing of the setting of the regulations for the Montana wolf season. It just, so it really is, it's either timing or urgency.
Okay. So that's really how it comes down. So with the wolf hunts in Montana, this has obviously been documented for multiple seasons, multiple years about what's going on with the hunts and things of that sort. What was give everybody, if you can, I guess, the general overview of what the lawsuits, because you partner with Project Coyote on this. What was the goal for the lawsuit in order to affect change in these wolf hunting seasons going forward? Because just as a recap for those of you that are listening, so this came down on November 15th when the court order changed the wolf hunting season. And it was literally effective immediately. The ruling came out and all these changes were made, and we'll go into those changes. But just give everybody the baseline of what the lawsuit was about, what it's targeting, and what your aim was when you were going into this.
Yeah. So leading up to it, like, our concern is just watching what has happened in the legislature in Montana, and then with the Fish and Wildlife Commission and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks since 2021. Really, since Gianforte took office, we've seen a big shakeup on wildlife management, and particularly for wolves. It's very different than it was in 2020 and the 10 years before that, which is the period of time that wolves in the Northern Rockies have not had endangered species protections. So it's just seeing what's happening and knowing, like, one single person can kill 20 wolves, or all these snares, or just the ability to, like, shoot wolves over bait, like a lot of stuff, it just doesn't sit right. And even for, it's both sides of the aisle. Like, people want ethical wildlife management, and that's not what this is. And with that in mind, we just thought, like, how can we, like, what's our inroads into, like, maybe doing something about this? Because you can't just sue because you're upset, or you can't just say, hey, this is not cool, you guys. Like, you shouldn't manage wolves like this. That's not enough. So we've been working on the state level for Montana's wolves since last year, since even before I was here and in my position, commenting on the regulations. When the opportunities came about, I went to the commission meeting this year and did, like, an oral comment. We talked to people about what's going on. And it's not something we would normally do because it's in state court. But this is just an exception. This is one of those exceptions where, like, somebody's got to do something. And we had the opportunity to do something. And we had the support of, all the way to the top of Guardians. We're like, let's do it. So it kind of evolved over a few months, like, what the claims were going to be. But I can go into each of the claims if this is a good time for that. Okay. So we have 5 arguments, and again, like, this was like, what are the ways we can use the law to, like, get something to change? So we're really relying on the Montana Administrative Procedure Act, because we're arguing that with this new population estimate model, IPOM, they being the Fish and Wildlife Commission and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, they didn't follow the rules that they're supposed to follow for making decisions like this. So that's what we're alleging. Hopefully the court agrees with us. So we're saying that they violated MAPPA, the Montana Administrative Procedure Act, because they effectively amended the 2002 Wolf Management Plan to use this new population estimate model without putting that through the public process, which would have included commenting and like notice and comment rulemaking, like very basic agency procedure for decisions. So that is a big part of our lawsuit. It's just that you didn't, it's a legal question. Did you or did you not follow the rules that you're supposed to follow to put this wolf management rule out there? And then in Montana, we also have the constitutional right to participate in agency decision making. So again, because they didn't put this estimate model up for notice and comment rulemaking, we're also alleging that they violated our constitutional right to be part of the process before an agency makes a final decision. So that is our first argument. The second argument is a little more basic. Basically, the 2002 Wolf Management Plan on its own terms says this needs to be reviewed and updated every 5 years, and they haven't done it
Easy one.
since then. Yeah. Yeah, a little less complicated.
Just math.
It's been 20 years, which is obviously more than 5. So,
Wow. Yeah, 20.
Right. Which is like, think of where we've come with science and technology in 20 years. Like, let's think about what the internet was like in 2002. Like, we were still dialing, like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't be managing. Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah. And then so they're using this plan as the foundation for like setting this quota that would kill 40% of the wolf population. So that's number 2. Number 3 is also based on a constitutional right, which is the right to a clean and healthful environment. And not every state has that. I think it's only a handful, but we do in Montana. And it's also the right that's guaranteed for future generations, which is, we call this the public trust doctrine. And so the state actors, they are responsible for managing the trust. And the trust, we would argue, includes wildlife, including wolves. And so they need to be managing wolves for the benefit of the public and the future generations as well. So we would say minimally, they need to be making reasoned decisions for wolf management that would preserve them and not destroy them. And then our 4th and 5th claims are federal-ish. So we have our national parks, Yellowstone and Glacier. And before 2021, there were very restrictive kill quotas for wolves adjacent to those parks, because those are park wolves. They spend most of their time in the safety of the national park where they can't be hunted, where people point cameras at them and nothing happens. So we're saying that, because the National Park Service federally legally is required to conserve wildlife and leave it unimpaired for future generations, what the state is allowing adjacent to these parks interferes with the federal government's ability to carry out their legal responsibility. So we would say that the state law is preempted by federal law because the feds can't do what they're supposed to do when we have people killing 25% of the Yellowstone wolf population in a handful of months, which happened last year. And the 5th claim is very similar to that, except it would apply to the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, who have different laws that govern them, but they also have to manage with wildlife in mind and viable wildlife populations.
And what were some of the arguments from the other side? I hate saying the other side, it just pisses me off. We're all just people living different lives with different priorities, but same goal. Anyways, what were some of the basic or what were some of the arguments attacking these 5 points? As they seem pretty straightforward, but how did they make arguments against these? And also, I'm curious, how do you sort of argue some of these, like that the state is not preserving these animals for future generations, for example? I imagine it's hard to decide what constitutes preservation in at least a future sense. So how do you prove that that's not happening, like in an active court of law? You know what I mean? Like what does that look like? Because I imagine the argument might be, well, we are preserving them to a certain number, just not the one you'd like. So how do you approach, subtleties like that or complexities like that?
Yeah, I mean, litigating really opens up your eyes to how intelligent people can make a logical sounding argument for things that seem ridiculous. Yeah. So I've read opinions that I'm like, I cannot agree with this, but that was a good argument. And I haven't seen the arguments. I haven't read the briefing of the other side. But there's a lot of discretion, especially with the public trust doctrine. And this is one of those things that the public trust doctrine itself is super, super old. And, from before we were the United States, this is a concept that's been around for a long time, but in different iterations. So at its most basic form, the public trust doctrine would cover navigable waters. And then through litigation, where people sue and say, hey, this should be included too, and here's why. Different states have done different things with that. So, what's really helpful though for this case is that constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. That is what makes this a strong claim in Montana. And, it's going to be up to the judges and the Montana courts to say what is and what isn't a public trust resource. And that could go a lot of directions. It seems obvious that the state should manage our resources and our wildlife for the benefit of all. But there's a lot of room, I think, for people to say, well, this is what I think, and I don't agree that we should have this many wolves, or the minimum viable population of wolves was set at 300. That's not based on science. That is a political number. And so they, I think, would say, well, as long as we're above 300, we're preserving the population, which is how is killing 900 wolves preserving the population? That doesn't make sense. Yeah. But they would say, oh, we're trying to get down to 150 and that's our goal. So at least you'll have 150. And so technically we are preserving. Right. It's. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Because we heard that number. We've heard these numbers factor. It's because it seems like you're a part of this series of talks that we've had with Nick Jivak and then Ryan Devereaux and now with you, that these IPOM numbers, these general population numbers are either overinflated or underinflated, and it really doesn't make for good policy making. And there's no correct count scientifically, it seems, because Steve and I were going over IPOM with Ryan, and it's just very basic. And we were just saying it before we got onto the episode with you, is that you could see 5 wolves in one spot and see the same 5 wolves 20 miles down the road, and you would count them as 5 and 5, as 10, and not the same 5. So it's just, there's a lot of that doesn't make sense to me as a person who loves the environment and is just this isn't right. What you were talking about legislatively, this going into the court situation, do you guys have are you wary of that situation because of the way the midterms and everything voted out in Montana? I know it's a very red state. I know, is that a factor in what you guys are looking at as this sort of goes down the road here? I know the court, or the judge in I think it was a judge in Chicago, and correct me if I'm wrong, that made the stop and the restraining order for the hunt. When it gets to this session, are you guys wary of how this is going to turn out, or how, like you said, these opinions are going to sort of go flying, and what the ultimate decision is going to be?
So the judge that gave us our order is a state court judge in.
It was the state in Montana? Okay.
Yeah. So we're just totally in the state court. But we're definitely wary. Like, I was thinking about, could these be like overturned per se? And I'm concerned less with like the rulings being overturned because they're so specific. But I am worried about retaliation, both by the legislature, which will be getting redder, and people on the ground. Like, we have received threats both to ourselves and like, if you keep doing this, it's the shoot, shovel, and shut up. Like, we're going to kill them anyway, which I don't doubt for a second. For sure. I think they're doing it anyway. I don't think it really matters. Like, they're going to do what they want. But I mean, Rep Fielder, who is the one that's been pushing these laws that from last session, has already said this year, like, we need to come out swinging harder against wolves to make sure like the intent of those laws in 2020 is carried out better than it is right now. I mean, this guy shows up to the commission meetings and does public comment and says to the commission members, you're not like following the laws that I wrote the way that I intended because you're not killing enough wolves. Like, so that's what we're up against. And I put nothing past a lot of people that kind of see wildlife through that perspective as like, they just want to eradicate wolves. They don't want wolves. There is a part of the population of people that just was like, no, wolves would be better. Which
weird,
right? And not good for anyone, really. Like, they play such an important role in our environment, and they have an inherent right to exist there. So I'm worried. I don't know what they're going to do. And I think it would be interesting because the judge could say, you know, those laws were unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Then they'd have to get creative because they can't just pass them again. You know, they'd have to do it in a way that seems constitutional. So I don't know what they can do. I have no doubt that they will do something. And I know that they're already trying to change the Constitution itself, and that clean and healthful environment. Which there's a climate case moving through the Montana State Court right now under the public trust doctrine, which is this group of cases, the brainchild of a group called Our Children's Trust, and they're leading these climate cases all over the country. And they have a trial in Montana State Court in February. So, and it's based on the same provision. So I know they're already trying to change it, which is just such a shame. Like, it's so special to have a constitutional right to a clean and healthful. Like, wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't the people of the state want that? Like, the lengths that they'll go to move their agenda forward is really alarming.
Yeah. Actually, what does restraining order mean in this like, can you explain in this context? Of course, I'm not an attorney, so to me, a restraining order means something very elementary, but that I cannot apply to this context myself. Like, why the choice wording of restraining order? How does that apply to this?
Yeah, so it's a legal term of art, a TRO, a temporary restraining order. So the motion we filed to get this restraining order is called a motion for a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction. So the temporary restraining order is, it started on the 15th, it went into effect immediately, and it expires on the 29th. Our hearing is on the 28th. And at that hearing, the judge will get the information they need to decide if they want to extend the temporary restraining order through the rest of the lawsuit. So at that point, it would become what we would call an injunction. And And that would be till the merits of the case are figured out. So the reason that, we would ask for this, or that why people use this as a tool, is because if things kept going as they're going, while the merits of the case are considered and while the judge figures out how to rule on the merits of the case, we would be irreparably harmed. Like, all those dead wolves are wolves we are not going to get back. So there's certain requirements that you have to show to say, like, you need to put this restraining order in effect, or we'll be harmed so much that even if we win the lawsuit, it won't fix our injuries, which is the whole point of a lawsuit, right? And the temporary restraining order it's a big deal. Like, it's effective immediately. And that's just after the judge read our motion for it. So the other party didn't have a chance to be heard yet. And so that's why we have the hearing set so quickly, so that both sides can kind of have their moment in court, and the judge can take all of that information and arguments from both sides to decide whether to move it forward or not.
So during this temporary restraining order period, what would be an illegal activity now that was not just minutes before it was enacted?
Yeah. So killing more than 5 wolves would be an illegal activity because the judge took the bag limit, in quote unquote, which makes me throw up in my mouth.
Per person? 5 per person, or you mean 5?
5 per person. So before the TRO went into effect, it was 20. That was new. It was 5 up to 2020. And then when all this anti-wolf stuff started happening, it became 20 wolves per person, 10 via trapping and 10 via hunting.
So now 5 would be illegal. More than 5.
Up to 5. Yeah, more than 5. Setting a snare would be illegal, which snaring and trapping season doesn't start until the 28th. So that with the TRO, right. So that's going to be a big deal if we got the preliminary injunction. But right now it'll only stop snaring for 1 day. So you know what? It's 1 day. It's better than 0. And then the national parks argument that the federal government can't do their job, essentially. So the judge reinstated quotas that used to exist bordering Glacier and Yellowstone. So they used to be called wolf management units. The state was broken up into these WMUs. This year, they said, let's not do that anymore. Let's just do trapping districts, which are big. There's 7. But what happened is the judge said, well, outside of Glacier, there used to be Wolf Management Unit 110. That had a quota of 2. We're putting that back into effect. So now it's illegal for more than 2 wolves to be killed in that unit. Whereas before the TRO went into effect, it was that region was 195 wolves could die, and including the WMU area. And now it at least protects those wolves bordering the park. The best part was reading the FWP email about changes immediately in effect that said one of the units north of Yellowstone was closed immediately, which was like, wow, because 1 wolf has already been killed there, and they reinstated the quota of 1. There's 1 more unit of north of Yellowstone, which has a quota of 1. It's still open. Oh, I haven't checked today, but last time I checked, it was still open because they haven't killed any wolves there yet. But if they kill 1, it's closed. So, I mean, even for 2 weeks, we saved some wolves tangibly.
Yeah, because I'm reading this all as you were going through it, and you're right. I mean, at least the fact that the quotas were 20 per person. I mean, I was saying it to Stephen before we got on here. I mean, basically, you could have 20 people if they were successful to the bag, to the limit. That's 400 wolves just taken out by 20 people, which is...
That's wild. I've never thought about it like that.
It's a wild number to even think about, just doing the simple math about it. The snares and things like that. And yeah, you were saying the quotas. I'm reading it through as you were saying it. So 2 wolves in WMU 110. And then, yeah, they closed the hunting and trapping in WMU 313. So, I mean, it's... And I think that's what people... I don't know if everybody understands that this is literally a 2-week temporary restraining order reprieve. It's not set in stone.
Yeah.
What's the... And you said, so now, let me just read because I have the paper in front of me. I don't want to get it wrong. So obviously the hearing is for the 28th. So it's, you have Thanksgiving and 4 days later, you're in court basically. What's the argument? And literally you're going off your 5 points that you explained to Steve and I just before. What's the work that you guys are doing, if you can say? I don't know how, legal arguments work and stuff like that. And if you can explain what you're going to be putting forth, what are the things that you guys are putting together? Is it just defending those 5 points and really delving deep into those 5 ideas of these are the reasons why, and here are bullet points, A through Z of why this has to continue till we get to the litigation part of it that the merits are figured out? Yeah.
So just to take a step back, so we have like the lawsuit, right? That's where we have those 5 arguments. And so that was October 7th or something. That was a little while ago. Then we filed the motion for the TRO and preliminary injunction, which was slightly more specific. And that's where we got this TRO with the snaring and the kill quota per person and the national park stuff. So that will be the focus of this hearing on the 28th.
Okay.
After that, we'll go into the merits of all 5 arguments. So when we go to court on the 28th, basically the state has to show up and argue why the preliminary injunction isn't necessary. And we will argue why it is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what you're saying. So really the 28th is that point. So basically you guys are going to make your argument, state makes their argument, and the decision is made there whether it's going to continue. So obviously I think what people who are wolf advocates and things, what they're looking for is that they continue this TRO until all those merits are figured out scientifically. Is there a basis that you guys obviously have to see considerable progress in making sure that these 5 arguments are met to the standards that you guys are looking for, correct? That's what you're hoping for, that gets figured out on the 28th so that it moves forward, right?
So on the 28th, we're hoping, we're basically just defending the TRO.
Okay.
And then, seeing if we can get it broader. Those are decisions that our lawyer, it'll come down to her based on what she thinks is possible. The TRO itself, even though it's only 2 weeks, was a really big deal. And, it's in the wolf world, it's been like a little mini celebration. We've had a lot of people reaching out, because we've, especially like in the Northern Rockies, we have just been beaten down for so long, and it is so difficult to do something other than tell the federal government to list wolves again, which who knows when they're going to do that, if they're going to do that. So our focus on the 28th is to defend what we have now, because we want, while we figure out those 5 claims in the rest of the litigation, which could be months, our next hearing could be in months. We don't want wolves to die. We don't want snares on the landscape. And, I think about it snares are now allowed because of a law that was passed. They being the legislature, are requiring the commission to allow the use of snares. We're arguing that's an unconstitutional law. under the public trust doctrine claim. So if we don't get this PI and things go back to status quo before we got this restraining order, there will be wolves dying in snares. But then if we win, those snares would have been unconstitutional. And so all these wolves are going to die based on things we're alleging are illegal. And so that's why I know it's a lot too. And it's in the motions and so I don't know if I answered your question, but really this hearing is to try to preserve wolves from the things that we're challenging while we figure out if our challenge is going to be successful.
Right. So to extend it until that several months might pass before your next hearing.
Yeah, exactly.
At least extend it till then, and then you come up with another game plan.
And then there will be more briefing, more arguments, more court time, and then the judge will eventually tell us if those 5 claims, if any of them are correct. And so there's a long way to go here.
And then at that point, what are the possible outcomes?
It's a good question.
It's too early.
Yeah, there are so many.
Why do you believe, I guess in your personal opinion or your personal looking at this, why do you think this was able to be instated at all just for the 2 weeks? Because I think, like you said, listen, we've seen all the lawsuits that have been brought. We're still waiting for that Wolf review. If Deb Haaland or President Biden or anybody listens to this podcast, which, if they do, it'd be great.
Oh, Biden's
if, just where's the review for that? That's 2.5 months overdue. Why do you think there was even a sliver of possibility that this was put into effect for at minimum, at least these 2 weeks?
We have an incredible lawyer. She made really good arguments. And a lot of this, a lot of the rhetoric, a lot of the narrative, a lot of the discussions are very emotional, and as they should be. I mean, I think we're all collectively really upset. We don't want this to be happening. When you get into court, though, that's not what it is. It can help to put things in a narrative perspective because judges are people too. But she made excellent legal arguments.
It's a great place to be arguing legality. I'm really interested in this, like how it looks to watch these types of court cases unfold, because you're mentioning all these points and I'm like, man, these are really great points, but I guarantee somebody's going to find dozens and dozens of arguments against them. And I would love to see this particular lawyer because she's obviously skilled, man. I mean, like John said, we've heard of so many lawsuits being put forth, and you guys are basically doing the impossible. I mean, just on the on your website, just looking at those milestones on that one page there, the things you guys are getting done are things that dozens and dozens of people are trying to get done, and somehow you're doing it.
Yeah,
I'd love to watch it.
It's going to be. I'm hoping we're celebrating after. It's going to be. They're going to come with their best arguments, and I have so much faith in our lawyer. And I think too with this particular case, I was thinking about how does this inform future cases in other states? And I think in a lot of ways it doesn't, because it is so specific to how this happened. I mean, she took all this information, all these processes or lack of processes for 2 years and figured out where are the holes, where are the legal holes. And that is what she went for. And I mean, it's just good. It's just comes down to really incredible lawyering.
Man, how do you sleep for the next year? Just when something like this is happening and you're involved in it and you're waiting for the next date, and then the date gets rescheduled, I'm sure millions of times, or whatever happens. It's just how do you sleep waiting for stuff like this to come to fruition?
Things become normal. I've had a few sleepless nights, definitely. When we got the TRO, I just sat back in my chair and was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Did this really happen?
Us too. I mean, we weren't even there, and us too, actually, right? When I started seeing the Instagram posts, I'm like, what? Something occurred that something happened. I can't believe that something happened.
Yeah.
You know, it was just so long of one type of news for so long, and then people were sharing. I almost didn't even. I swear, when I saw it the first few times, I almost didn't even. I just moved right past it. I didn't even register it, and then I was like, "Wait, what did I just read?" Like real quick, and then people just kept sending it to us over and over again. And I'm like, "It's real. Something happened." Like for a minute, I just couldn't believe that something good happened.
Yeah. And, it's tough because we don't know what's going to happen on the 28th or the 20th, whenever the judge decides. And
of course,
that's going to be sleepless. I have some sleepless nights coming up for sure. Hopefully, because we're up celebrating until 2 a.m, that we're going to save some wolves while we figure this out.
We might need to zoom into the party, into the celebration.
Yeah,
yes.
Do a quick podcast with everybody.
I know. 100%.
So it's a practice of like, really, like, you don't know what's going to happen. All we can do is our best, and that's what we've done. And that's how I sleep.
That's the best way, right? All we can do is our best is the best way to, I think.
Yeah, it's out of our hands, and
do your best, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have done more. You've had the effect that others couldn't. And it's not for lack of trying. It's just that you were able to, like you say, craft these arguments in a way. And Stephen's right. I think hitting it at a legal level, in legal speak, is the way to essentially promote these things, as opposed to, like you say, the emotion, the feelings. Trust me, we get it on. We've talked to people on both ends.
Yeah,
and it doesn't really factor in. It's more white noise, unfortunately.
Well, also, I think it triggers folks who don't agree with these particular arguments. Like you have to come at it from a collected legal place. Otherwise, you risk eliciting a harsher response to the emotional stuff. I just feel like that's true. I don't know.
I agree, but I think that people think what they think, and it's very difficult to change somebody's mind. And it's especially difficult to change somebody's mind when it's a very emotional thing. Yes, and when their friends believe it and their family believes it and they were raised on that. And it's like, there are situations where you can legal all of it and it doesn't matter. Yeah. And so I think some conversations are a lost cause, but I totally agree with what you said too. Like, you know what people want is to like put food on the table and have a good night to sleep, and for their loved ones to be safe and happy and healthy. And everybody can agree with that. And
100%.
I think it's good to remember that, because these are big disagreements.
It is.
And it's easy, I think, especially in the age of computers and screens and social media, to like, I get these threatening emails and I'm like, I'm in my mom's room, my mom's house right now for Thanksgiving with like pictures of me as a kid behind. Like, I'm just,
and they probably
people,
are too.
And I think, especially today in this divisive, landscape that we're all trying to navigate, like, we are just people. And
those first 5 things that everybody cares about. And then there's like these external extra things. And for some reason we totally stopped connecting on those first 5 things.
Right.
And we're like, no, let's go to the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th thing. We'll argue about that. But those first 5 things, we just forget that like the fundamental aspects of our lives are, we want very similar things. And if we just connected a little bit more on those things, then maybe the extra things that we don't agree on,
we just are.
Heated, they just are.
Yeah, I mean, the middle is the place that we always try to go, and it's so funny because the more people we talk to, they say the same things Stephen and I are trying to promote, and I think it was Nick Chivak. He goes, "It's so awkward to be saying radical middle when the middle should just be the middle." It's not, like you said, it's Stephen, you just said it. It's the top 5 things that everybody cares about. That's where we should start. And then, like you say, instead of, like you say, Stephen, we're going to go to number 25. And it's like, why?
That's what people will click on. That's what,
exactly.
But it's like, And that's the world. We're so on our screens clicking on stuff, and we think that that's the world. But if we actually just step away.
Yeah, and we're dying to feel things these days, and dying to feel things that are genuine. And sometimes that's this type of thing. And anger is Oh,
and the media plays on that. They know that. Even though we can all agree on a handful of things, we're just going to disagree on some stuff. And hopefully we could still be respectful to each other when we do that and just say, hey, we think differently.
100%.
Which happens, that happens. That's the radical middle at work, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, for you then, Lizzy, a couple things is that, are you going to be there on the 28th, or is it, you are going to be there? Okay.
I'm going to be there. Yep.
You're going to be there. So that's that. Is there, I know they always have public comment periods. This is not one of those things. This is basically right. So people are just going to have to basically wait and see, like you all, what's going to happen. And we're going to get the fallout from that on the 28th, essentially, right? That's
we will be keeping, if you follow either WildEarth Guardians or Project Coyote, you'll know within 30 seconds of us knowing basically what happened. Right. We're ready for either way, just because people are so invested. In this case, particularly, we want to keep people as surprised as we can. And I know everybody is I think a lot of people are going to lose sleep, knowing that this is happening and that this could be huge. Either way, it's going to be huge.
Either way, it's going to be big, yeah.
It depends if we're having a sad drink or a happy one,
Right. Especially that. And you being the Carnivore Coexistence Advocate, I'm sure, just a deviation for a second, grizzly bears are coming down the same pike now. So it's really, and Steven loves bears. I don't know if they're your second favorite, but or first. I don't even know.
I think it's mountain lions, wolves, bears in that order.
Mountain lions, wolves, so bears, okay. But this is another situation that I'm sure, Lizzy, your team, or the people that you work with, that's another one that's threat, especially in Montana and obviously in surrounding states. I'm sure, like you say, the sleepless nights are going to get more and more, but do you think this could be, again, whether this goes one way or the other, do you feel like this could be something that you guys can build on in a positive way to defend other big carnivores like this, if it ever gets to the grizzly factor or mountain lions, anything that could be perceived as a threat to people on the other? Again, I hate the other.
It's
stuff.
It's just the convenient thing to say. But yeah, we know what you mean.
But anyway, yeah, you know what I mean.
Specifically, no. Again, because it's so specific. But so generally, right. Absolutely.
Okay.
Even the TRO, even if things go horribly wrong on the 28th, this has given people hope. And we have been needing some of that, especially for wolves in the Northern Rockies. And I don't underestimate the power of that at all. The amount of calls I've received, mostly from inside Montana, of people who are just thank you for doing this and for your work and the support. And I think it's just what we do, this fight that we're all in to protect wildlife against the odds in a lot of cases and against very powerful government entities or private entities. It's an uphill battle, and we need those little wins to keep us going. And I think we already have one of those. And I think that's really powerful. And so I think that will carry on for further than November 29th at 5 p.m. when the TRO expires, regardless of what happens. And then, like you said, I do carnivores in the Northern Rockies. So grizzlies are a huge part of my job. Grizzlies and wolves take up all of my time, even though there's mountain lions, which are some people's favorite, I guess. Black bears, coyotes. Gosh, the amount of coyotes that get killed by the federal government every year is astounding.
I know.
Yeah. There's so much to do. But we're gearing up for the delisting, the answer to the delisting petitions for the grizzly bears, because they're still protected right now by the Endangered Species Act. But, not if Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana have anything to say about it. And so we're ready. We're getting ready for that. We have a great team. The thing too with this work is we are each other's resilience. Even at Guardians, our wildlife team, we're very close and we keep each other going. And then even in the community, broader community, like we all work in a lot of coalitions. We do a lot of this work together, which can be very difficult, but also very rewarding and very effective. So we have a lot to do. And, I think when it comes to like inadequate state management, right, of what we're alleging is inadequate state management, that's one of the things that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has to consider when they're looking at should this species have protections under the Endangered Species Act or not. And so with the wolves in the Northern Rockies, they don't have those protections, but they've been petitioned. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has been petitioned to reinstate those. And they found that those were valid petitions and there might be something there that would warrant listing. And so that we're waiting for them to come out with that decision, whether or not they will be listed or not. But those petitions are based on what's happening in Idaho and Montana, the inadequate state regulatory mechanisms to manage these species in a way that we wouldn't need those federal protections. And so this is a big deal. It's just what's happening in the states at the state level and us bringing this case and bringing attention to it. And any success we have, I think, shows that like something is wrong here. And it is a bigger push for the federal government to reinstate those protections. And I think that we can draw, and others have, the parallel between what's happening with wolves now and what would happen with grizzly bears if they did lose their protection under the Endangered Species Act. It's not hard to imagine state-driven eradication going into effect immediately because they suffer from the same bad PR image that wolves do, that sharks do. They're predators, they're carnivores. Like they scare people, and grizzlies are no different. So I think in the more general sense, like there's a bigger narrative going on here. And this case is kind of just a piece of that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I said this a couple of times, well, more than a couple of times now, that when you look at those, because you named some of the predators that I typically name too when we talk about wolves in that vein, right? And you see, even with bears, you get the bear, bear toys and stuff. And bears, in a way, even though they're exponentially more dangerous to humans in a wild setting than wolves are, everybody says, "Oh, a cute, cuddly bear," and you go, "Right, okay, that's a little bit different." And this is not me being a proponent of hunting or killing grizzlies to the level that they would obviously go to, but just it shows you. Nobody really thinks this way of sharks or of orcas or of any other apex predator in any situation other than wolves. And it's striking to me really just the balance and how it sort of hangs there for people, where they're either vilified to a point where they want to eradicate them all, or they're put up on a pedestal of these spiritual beings that they may or may not be, depending upon your way of thinking.
Yeah.
For you, what's it like? Because And it's a shame that you're getting people coming at you in a vilified way or via email, which is not the way we should be as humans. But if you have any experience with people on the ground, just normal, regular people, do you see that it's a 50-50 split? Is it teetering in a different direction? What do you see with your work that people are seeing these things put into action and they're the ones on the ground seeing it physically? Because if you live in Montana, you're going to be able to see all this stuff happening in your backyard. So what is that show? What do you get shown, if you can elaborate on any of that?
Yeah. Just to go back to like what you're like, why wolves? And even when we're kids, it's the big bad wolf, right? Like
right.
Even in children's books, they are up against like a very powerful narrative. And I think what's happening on the ground, it's tough to say because there's a lot of different groups at play. And there are hunters and trappers who want to hunt and trap wolves. There are hunters that are like, I would, but this is unethical. Like, this is not fair chase hunting. This is not subsistence hunting, like shooting over bait, like, night hunting. No. And I think, I mean, although I've received some hate mail, the amount of appreciation mail has dwarfed that. Like, it's so much more positive. I think a big proponent on the metaphorical other side is livestock producers, right? Because that's whose backyard the wolves tend to favor if they are going to be in anybody's backyard. And that's something we work on a lot. Because again, these are people that want to put food on the table. And there's their real fears that they have that their ability to do that is going to be negatively impacted because wolves are on the landscape. So, it's, again, these are just people. For the most part, we just disagree. And so what we're trying to do is we focus a lot on coexistence. So like a big piece of my job and my daily work is like, how can we coexist? How can everybody coexist? And there are ways, people who don't want wolves because they have livestock. Well, what other ways can we help except for killing wolves? Like, that's not the answer. Science shows that that's not the answer. It actually makes the problem worse. But again, there's this narrative that's created and shepherded by powerful, wealthy individuals who are lobbying for, the cattlemen people and the, beef industry. And that's what we're up against. And it benefits them to continue to feed the flames of this narrative that wolves are the enemy. And so, it's can be hard for someone, even, the internet is full of, you could find something to support whatever you think. And so there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of misinformation that overlies like the very deep emotion that people have about this topic. So it's really hard to say like, what's happening on the ground. I think people love wildlife. I think people really appreciate like outdoor recreation and the value that wolves have. I think a lot of people are on board with that. And I have been pleasantly surprised at how well received our lawsuit has been, especially in Montana, which is a state where, we're up against the legislature, for example. But I don't think the legislature represents the people, ironically. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. I mean, it's you guys are doing exceptional work. Just overall. I mean, overall, not just on this, but this was a win. Like you say, no matter what happens on the 29th, this was a win and hopefully opens the doors and gives you guys a base level, and other groups for that matter, a base level of how these issues can be approached and how these battles can be fought in a civil legal way that hopefully everyone gets a little piece of what they're all looking for. And I people are people, and I love that you keep going back to that point. And it's massive. It's something that I think if more of us understand that, the more that these issues would probably be more cut and dry, as opposed to these wild accusations being hurled at each other. And it's just, It doesn't get us anywhere other than more divided. So my last question for you, Lizzy, because I want people to follow WildEarth Guardians. We'll get to that in just a minute. My last question for you is, when you hear the word wolf, what's the thing that comes to your mind?
Well, I have a feeling that there's a feeling that comes to mind, and it's just like peace. I picture a wolf out there just like in the sun on the landscape, with their family. And it just makes me feel happy to think of that. And I think they're survivors. If we let them live, they will survive and figure it out. And I think that's really special. They can make it work in a lot of scenarios if we stop killing them so intentionally. So I guess maybe hope is the culmination of what I'm trying to say here. I'm hopeful, and they make me hopeful because, it's like they can do this. We can do this. If they can survive what they've survived, then we can do our part to help them.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Tell everybody, because once this episode if you're listening to this episode now, it'll only be a few days until that the answer comes out, the continued rulings and things like that. So just tell everybody where they can go to follow WildEarth Guardians. Obviously, they can follow Project Coyote, but where they can keep up to date on all the work that you're doing specifically and WildEarth Guardians as well on this issue and other topics that are coming up.
Yeah. So simple ways are just our Facebook and our Instagram, just at WildEarth Guardians. And then if you go to our website, wildearthguardians.org, you can get involved and you can sign up for emails, and you'll get notifications when we have big wins from all of our programs. And then that will also give you, if you want to get involved more than just following the action, that email list that you can sign up for is the best way to do that, because we give you as many opportunities as we can to have your own voice heard through a variety of ways. So if you want to get involved, go to our website, sign up for action alerts. And then otherwise, if you want to just stay up to date on what we're doing, our socials are the best place for that.
Awesome. Lizzy, thank you so much for giving Stephen and I the really good explanation on what's happening, the work you guys are doing, what it all means. And yeah, when things, I think, happen either way, let's have you back on to really dive into this stuff a little bit more. And, if it goes the way we I think hope it's going to go, we'll see what happens. But we definitely want to have you back on for anything else, especially if it impacts grizzlies too, because wolves and grizzlies are really, are two. I mean, they coexist so beautifully on the landscape. So let's have you back on sooner than later. Thank you so much, Lizzy Pennock from WildEarth Guardians. Thank you for everything.
Thanks, guys. What a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. How's to all out there? And Stephen, I'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Looking to support Wolf Connection or sponsor one of the wolves in our pack? Just go to wolfconnection.org, click on the Donate tab, and find out more information.